Okay. We're recording the meeting. Once again, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are. Thank you for joining us on the second live session, but the first one on the modules. With us today is Marlene Ochoki. For those of you who weren't here 2 weeks ago for the welcome live session, Marlene is the Global Policy Lead on Climate Justice at CARE. And well, you've already gotten to know her as well in the module, but she's with us today and will facilitate the live session on advocacy and policy influencing for climate justice and resilience. We have 75 minutes minus 4, and we'll start with a quick icebreaker or maybe more a warm-up. Then there will be a debrief of the module content led by Marlene. There's time also to ask questions, and we'll go into breakout rooms and have you discuss amongst yourselves on policy. And we'll also quickly review the assignment to make sure that you understand what we're expecting and to allow you the opportunity to ask some questions. And then we should wrap up in 70 minutes. But first, a very short quiz to get us all excited about this module. And you can use the chat to respond. So can you name one country that submitted their 3.0 nationally determined contributions plan by the 12th of February, which was the initial UN deadline? Who knows of a country that's already submitted it? So I can see Canada come in, the UK. Maybe the Netherlands, or maybe not. Who else? Japan? Anyone else wants to do a guess? There are more countries than one. And of course, you can now try to Google the answer, and I honestly don't know about the Netherlands, Karina, but Marlene is giving a thumbs up. Anybody else who knows or wants to do a guess of a country that already submitted their updated NDC? French, that can mean a lot. Well, the UK indeed, and the US indeed. Canada, I don't see on the list. I'll put the response in the chat, but Marlene, please let us know if this is correct. So what we found is from Africa only Zimbabwe, and then some other countries that met the deadline include Marshall Islands, Singapore, St. Lucia, Andorra, New Zealand, United Kingdom, Switzerland, Uruguay, the US, Ecuador, Brazil, and the Emirates. And Nadia also puts a link in the chat. All right. France.
I want to... So the EU has not submitted its NDC yet. And France, the Netherlands, all fall under the EU. So we shall be waiting for when they will submit the NDCs. It's not clear when they will do it. Everyone is waiting. I think one of the issues that is keeping making the delay is about the ambition. How ambitious would that be? And so they have to have an agreement between all the 27 countries. I think that is the main problem here. But so the EU has not yet submitted, but the others have submitted. We had Japan, we had UAE, we had Dubai, We have Brazil, the host of the next COP. Canada has also submitted. Yeah.
Thanks, Marlene. And you were right, Vanessa. Okay, second question. Where will COP31 take place? Who knows? Put it in the chat. Any ideas? I think we all know where COP30 is going to take place. That is indeed Brazil, but we're now looking at COP31. So that's not in 2025, but in 2026. Vanessa saying Australia. Any other guesses? And Karim is saying Turkey. Anyone else? I think we have 2 more people joining us. Okay, Marlene, do you want to reveal the answer?
So I think so far Australia has confidently expressed interest. I know Turkey has been doing that, but it's not as clear as we know for Australia, basically. But I think after Bonn, this should be officially announced because of they call it the trio, the Troika thing, you know? So the continuation from UAE to Brazil now to the next COP presidency. So I'm sure by Bonn we'll know, but up to now we know that it's Australia that would be hosting, and then possibly in 2020, the other COP would be hosted in Nigeria or rather in Africa. Nigeria has expressed interest to do that. And after Nigeria or after Africa, the other one would be maybe in India. So these are countries that have confidently expressed interest, and it's been registered basically. Yeah.
All right. Thanks, Marlene. Well done, everybody. I hope you're ready to dive into today's session. So here is just a quick overview of the content of Module 1. The main piece was a very rich online course in which you learned more about advocacy and policy influencing in the area of climate justice and resilience. We have both the group assignment and an individual assignment. If you haven't done the quiz, please do this before the module closes on Sunday. Well, we're in our live session today, and every module has a module review. And thanks so much in advance for filling those out, as it really helps us to improve our training. Okay, we would like to ask you all to go to Mural, and Nadia will put the link in the chat. I can't see the chat now. So if you click on the link that Nadia shared in the chat, then you will be taken to Mural. And I can quickly, well, I'll stop sharing in a second, but basically we would like to ask you to let us know what you learned, something new that you learned in this module, and something that you found difficult or yeah, that you would like to receive some clarification on. And I'll stop sharing so we can quickly show you how it goes. Nadia is sharing her screen. So I think you can just visit as a guest. I see some of you have already made it to the Mural boards. And then basically you can just pick one of those sticky notes and put your answers there. And we'll give you 5 minutes to fill this out. And then we'll have a look at your responses. So please take your time and let us know what you learned, what you find difficult still. I think Jaap is having some difficulties with his connection. If you cannot access Mural, don't hesitate to just write in the chat and then we can copy it for you onto the Mural board. So don't worry if Mural is giving you some troubles. Please put it in the chat. You can also send it to us as a private message.
So I already see some new things that we learned. I'm not seeing anything difficult that we encountered, so that is very good. New things we learned about the global stock tech, NAPAs, knowing the difference between apps and NAPAs, so that is great. We also learned about the community-based adaptation approach that CARE is using and other organizations in implementing their adaptation action work. We learned about the NDC submissions. You met cool colleagues from other country offices for the assignments. That's awesome. One of other aspects that we should be able to get out of these modules or sessions is, apart from knowledge, is building a social capital. So networks, advocacy, policy influence is about relations, is about networks, is about friendship. It's about people who you know, who can quickly help you pull some things here and there. So that is really good that you're able to quickly meet cool colleagues or new people. We also learned about categorizing advocacy, direct and indirect. So that is basically the influencing power holder. You can do it direct, the lobby, litigation, activism, or indirect, educating, organizing. And here it's important to know when to do it. When do you want to do direct? There's some situations that would need direct advocacy. And there are some situations where you don't need to do direct, but you can do indirect. So the context here would be very, very important on how to choose which one to use. And the different examples of direct advocacy is basically a lot that we have seen happening at the COPs, where you see CSOs lining up, for example, next to key negotiating rooms where negotiators will be getting in and maybe, have their placards, or just because, for example, through one of the biggest networks, Climate Action Network, that most of you or organizations are part of, maybe sometimes we're given very strict rules not to misbehave, quote unquote. And so we will have sellotapes, but we'll mama, that is basically direct advocacy, or just holding placards, or just even using different strategies, or even just doing the maths within. And at the national level, also there are some other direct advocacy sometimes when the situation is very tricky, but also a lot of care advocacy at the national level has been also both direct and indirect, depending on on the context, on the situation, and the issue. But the best is usually where you're not working against, but finding ways to meet in the middle with if it's the countries at the national level. At the COP level, it's very difficult to get 197 countries agreeing to one thing. So all sorts of advocacy strategies will need to be deployed. So the context is very, very different. I don't see points these other side, so I think we're good. I don't know if there are any Nadia has stopped sharing, but it's okay. I was just going to ask if there are any points below that, but I didn't see any.
No, I think that was. Oh, I think that was it, Marlene.
I did not found. Okay, that's fine.
Can you see the presentation again? Okay. Then I'll pass it over to you, Marlene.
Thank you. Thank you, Diana. So hi, everyone, again. So basically, this was the different aspects of the module that you all went through, just understanding or a little refresher for those already advocates and then the call, what's advocacy about and how is it relevant to CARE's climate work approach. And then also, of course, relating to what is advocacy and how is it relevant to your organizations of climate change and approach that you use. Understanding the climate crisis and the currently inadequate political response. So looking at the different aspects around, the policies, the plans that we have, the geopolitics that is also playing a big role currently, at least in the climate space. So what does it mean? And then going into the different levels of advocacy. So the global level, national, local or sublocal, and also finally, the importance of advocacy partnerships. This is it, basically. This, I would think, apart from, after doing all the 1 to 5, number 6 is basically it. That is actually advocacy. So if you have allies, and I think this one you're going to learn in the second module with Chikondi on tools, but building advocacy partnerships could be individuals, could be through alliance, could be with your governments, is the strongest point where it will help enable you move to the right direction, depending on the context as well. But it's very, very important for you to know who to work with, know who to call, know who to write the email to, know who to just invite in your meeting. This is basically the height of advocacy or policy and influencing. So quickly, I will be able to just, run through the session before we get into Q&A. Diana, if you could move to the next slide. And here I have the arc of ambition in the Paris Agreement. A lot of the current discussions around climate justice, climate change, policy influence is anchored on the Paris Agreement. And in this module, we have looked at a number of policies, particularly the NDCs and NAPs. These are two main policies and plans. I'm not saying the others are not important, but these are the two main policies and plans that are developed at the national level and then discussed at the international level, or discussions around policy or directives of how to achieve these plans are now collectively discussed at the international level. For example, we all know the focus this year is the NDCs because of the year where we are getting the NDCs 3.0, okay? And these NDCs are developed at the national level. they are national plans, documents, national determined contribution. The same as NAPS under adaptation. So NDCs discussed under the mitigation context. And then we have the national adaptation plans discussed under the adaptation context. You know, what are the country's plans and priorities around adaptation? So this arc of ambition is where the most discussions around policy and influencing is taking place. And now there is a lot of policy influence around, not even now, but it started last year when NDCs were being submitted. Like we did in the assignment, the first, teaser, we had a deadline of 12th February for all the countries to submit the NDCs, but by then we only had about 10 to 12 NDCs. But then the submission deadline was extended to September. And now most NGOs are working around evaluating the already NDCs that have been submission and looking at the ambition. How ambitious are they? And the purpose for this particularly is for policy influence advocacy process as we head to Bonn and as we head to COP. And for those who are already in this space, you know that COP30, there's a lot of focus around the NDCs. So there's going to be a lot of focus around ambition and what is the situation, where is these plans taking us? So that would be one of the big discussions. And also, secondly, we also have a lot of discussion around adaptation because we are going to have the global goal and adaptation framework adopted in Brazil, in Belém as well. So there is a lot of work going on, for policy advocacy influence, like evaluating these NDCs, how ambitious are they? What has Canada said? What has UK said? What has, when the EU's, NDC come out, how is it looking like? How is China's NDC looking like? How is USA? Of course, we know they already submitted, but now that Trump is out of the, withdrawn out of the agreement, what does it mean for, for us in pushing or towards the big ambition that we have, of net zero emission and climate resilience by 2050. So there is a lot of focus around the ambition, the policy influencing advocacy around particularly the NDC work. And also the NAPS, the National Adaptation Plans. The NAPS 3.0 are also currently in place. They are coming up. And so countries, NGOs, advocates are also looking at for example, now we are looking at how are these NAPS and NDCs going to be coherent, that what countries have in their NDCs, the adaptation section is basically what they have in the NAPS, because there have been like a different parallel process. But because of the ambition that we are all looking forward to, and also wanting to bring adaptation to a certain level of equality with mitigation, how is these two processes, NAPS and NDCs, aligning to each other? How coherent are they? So that is why I have this arc of ambition, just to show you that all this work is stemming from the national level. These documents we develop from the national level. And then there's a lot of policy advocacy influence process at the regional levels. For example, there's the NAP Expo. There is a lot of meetings at the regional level coming up. We are going to Bonn. And then there's COP now, where we'll have the global also policy influence process that takes place. And another key thing is now the global stocktake that I've seen also a number of people say they have learned about. This is also very important within the climate policy influence process. The first one was in 2023 in UAE. And this process is after every 5 years. And, so there's a lot of work, how do we align the timelines of these processes, of these policies, so that they also coincide around the same time. So for example, it would have been ideal that 2025 we have NDCs 3.0 submitted. Maybe next year it would be more ideal to have GST, because then it will be clear to do like an evaluation of how the policies are taking us up to where. But you see, the timelines are not coherent. We are going to have the global goal on adaptation, adopted, and then countries will start implementing. Well, what is the timeline, with the adaptation, with NDC, with this GST? Because these are just processes that help us, measure where we are in terms of the 1.5, but also the ambition and the net zero emission that we are all working towards. Do we have any question up to that point before we move to the next slide? And I just talked about the NAPs and NDCs because these are not that they are the most important, but these are the main policies that are practically developed at the national level and have a lot of focus, and they're embedded in the UNFCCC, negotiation and also the processes. But there are other, plans and documents that countries develop, like long-term, strategies that they do internally, but they have to align with their NAPs and their NDCs. Okay, next slide. So after doing all the process and the influencing and understanding the different processes at the national level, at the regional level, at the global level, what's going on. Currently, the focus is the NDCs, and you will hear from next year, there is also the NAP 3.0, and you can see also the timelines are not coherent. But the discussions is after that, understanding where we are, where are the gaps on NDCs, how ambitious are they, where are the NAPs? Do all the countries have the NAPs? No. Out of, I think, of the 134 countries that need to have the NAPs, we have only around 55 countries. What does that mean for adaptation ambition? Now we're going to have the global goal on adaptation framework. What does it mean? But also, do we have the finance to implement these great adaptation actions? So all this process is anchored in the other slide of arc of ambition. So once that is clear, then we come to building advocacy and partnerships. And I try to bring photos of different contexts, basically, at the national level or subnational, and also the region, but also what we do at the COP. So, for example, the first photo here is also partnership within the different constituencies or social movements that, for example, K is part of, but also depends on other networks that your organization is part of. So the first photo where feminists demand climate justice, this one is, and we have some of CARE colleagues here in this photo. This is work of the Women and Gender Constituency, for example, focusing just around gender. So where is gender in the climate justice? Now there's a lot of development around gender and climate change action plans being developed. What's the progress? So we have different constituencies, different NGOs with different focus. So it's up to us as organizations knowing where do we want to align with what issue. So for CARE, for example, issues to do with gender, we align and work together with the Women and Gender Constituency, for example. If it is climate change, we align and work with Climate Action Network. So, and this is basically at that global and regional level, and also the national level for country offices. Who are the people that you're speaking the same language when it comes to gender or to climate change or to food, water, and nutrition, So, and how do you also hold meetings with them at the subnational or local level with the different stakeholders for helping, or if it could be through training, awareness, for them to be able to push for some issues, when budgets are being developed at the sub-local level, are the communities able to say, yeah, these are good plans that maybe a certain organization wants to come in with, but do they have the power to say, this is good, but we have done our analysis, and these are our priority issues in this community in terms of addressing climate change. So how do you build that advocacy strength, but also and who to know, how do you partner with who to ensure that your work, you do not receive or exhibit a lot of resistance, because advocacy, you'll find people who do not align with you or do not speak the same language with you. So how do you ensure that you have a lot of allies, you have a lot of friends, you have a lot of networks, you have calls with also politicians or people who will carry, the political will when they're passing some of these policies at the national assemblies, or, so all this is very important to have in your advocacy plan. An example of one of the advocacy that we did at the national level is when the Climate Change Act 2016 was being passed. And we had one of the member of parliaments who was a champion of climate justice. And this is an example from Kenya. And this member of parliament was also chairing the member of parliament's Environment and Climate Change Committee. So because we knew he is the champion and we could see a lot of work, he was one of the entry points for a lot of CSOs, particularly, to influence the process. And that made it a little bit easier for even this policy to go through. We have a number of policies that are stuck in parliament because there has not been that good political will even to pass that. So these are some of the advocacy and partnerships basically that I'm talking about. Next slide. And finally, this is just an example of, I'm sure for those who are engaged with the Kenya International Advocacy Handbook, you could have seen this photo. And this just shows that there's a lot of linkage from work, policy, and advocacy influence that we do at the national level. And it has a lot of linkage to what we do at the regional level and what we do at the international level. These are not standalone processes. For example, CARE, we work with CARE country offices, but also partners. So our global advocacy, policy and influence advocacy processes start from the national level. So we have to understand what's happening in the different country offices that are implementing climate change projects. And how do we document, for example, best practices? What approaches are they using to implement climate programs? And how are they successful or not? Is it working, What approach are these country offices using to influence, for example, national processes and approach on climate justice issues or climate justice matters? So these success stories stem from the national level. What is going on at the national level? What country offices are implementing at the national level? What our partners are doing at the national level? Then are also upscaled to the regional level in the different regional spaces that we have where, for example, I talked about CBA, the Community-Based Adaptation Conference, the NAP Expo, what's other regional? There are so many. I've just quoted those two that also we are more active around. We have the African Union Summit, for example. That is another regional level, for example, for the Africa region where they're able to engage in some of these discussions. But also we have the spaces even in the EU, for example, space and others. So understanding how do we use or bring up the work that is being done at the national level, evidence and community empowerment, and what is going on there. And then how a new policy is being developed. How do we influence this through the regional spaces? And then eventually, how do we also influence this through the global spaces, showing evidence to push for certain commitments that we need around climate finance, around ambitious NDCs, around, commitments towards maybe, elevating adaptation actions, because, for example, we know that adaptation has not been at par with mitigation. And there's a lot of push, for example, from the last COP29, there were a lot of good decisions on adaptation. For example, having adaptation as a standalone agenda item, having a high-level dialogue on adaptation every year at COP. Those are good opportunities to elevate, to showcase what we need for adaptation, what is working, and what maybe is needed to make it work best. So, where do we show in terms of expertise, resources needed, evidence, numbers, research, and that is why organizations do a lot of work, in building up momentum towards COP, towards looking at research or work that is going on, and because that is basically not to say that of course, some decisions are made at COP, but also maybe it's important for you to know that some decision would be even made before the COP, because we know there are all these other groups like the G20, the G7, the BRAC, all these groups, and some of these discussions are always discussed around these groups before we get to COP. So, and these are important spaces for policy influence and advocacy. I do not think we have any other slide, but these 3 slides will basically help us to summarize.
Marlene, sorry, there's just a question in the chat. What is SRMH in the yellow?
This one is basically around the reproductive health. This example, so the sexual, reproductive, and menstruation health. It's an example that was developed for this program. So sexual, reproductive, and menstrual health, one of the programs that CARE has been implementing. So just, that was just a quick overview of the modules, but now giving more specific examples of the different, work that you have read through, but now, just summarizing it to these different 3 slides. But I think this is one of the best time now to engage into, is it Q&A, Diana? Yeah.
Vanessa, did you have a question? I just saw you opening your mic.
Sorry, I didn't, I was just rejigging my computer and maybe
No problem.
But thank you, Marlene, for the presentation.
Anybody else? Do you have any questions for Marlene on something she mentioned just now, or something from the online course or the module content? This is your chance. Or anything else?
I'm also just trying to check the mural if anything has come on what was difficult sides, or what I am not able to access that. Nadia, is there anything on that section of the mural in terms of what was maybe difficult to understand? Yeah.
I'm going to take a look, but so far I hadn't seen anything before.
We appreciate also that there was quite a lot of information in the course and many links. So many more reports and websites for you to review. So you can, of course, also always go back to this course once you advance. Kerime, go ahead.
Hi, yeah, my question, so I understood everything fairly well. Thank you so much, Marlene. I have a question that's maybe not too relevant and maybe more as a general pondering about why the UNFCCC works like it does. So feel free to not answer if it's a stupid question like that. But what I was sort of surprising to me, I said that as well about the NAPAs and the NATs. Like I finally now understand the proper difference between them, so that's useful. But then I was looking into the nitty-gritty of who does the reporting for what, so also the NCs. And it seems to me that the Global South countries, or the not Annex 1 countries, have way more reporting requirements. And I'm just kind of wondering why. I tried to look it up on the UNFCCC website, and they're kind of like, oh, it's according to the principle of shared but differentiated responsibility. But it seems rather like opposite to me to then require the LDCs and less financially or resource rich countries to do more reporting. Like I don't really understand this requirements, but maybe you have some insights, but it's not very important.
Good question, or Kerime?
Yeah, and it's very important how does UNFCCC work the way it works. the UNFCCC is supposed to bring together the 197 countries to speak with one voice. That is not possible because of the different interests, especially for a lot of countries in that space. And with negotiations, with the experience and the time that I have been part of the negotiations, and at least you know, being as a negotiator particularly, is that it's very, it has not happened to at least have a one, you know, unified decision on something because of course the interest, but also the UNFCCC space is highly political. So it's about interests, who you know, and how is this helping you as your country. And we know that the context of the climate justice or the Paris Agreement is basically for the developed countries to provide finance to support developing countries address climate action, because of the historical responsibility of how the developed countries developed around climate justice. And we are also having emerging countries while at it. And so it's like a cat and chicken kind of situation, which is very sad because it is okay for that context of the UN, but there are people who are extremely in the midst of that crisis that do not even know why they are in the midst of that. And so it is not, sometimes I think it's not a logical space. How, because of how the reasoning from the parties, you know, yeah, so, but that is how basically is. And more reporting is because, you know, developing countries have more reporting because of adaptation. The adaptation concept is, if you look at the Paris Agreement, is very voluntary. But for developing countries, it is a priority for them. And even when you look at the biannual, you know, the report, UNFCCC mechanisms for reporting, the developing countries are, they should is an option, it's not a shall, like a mandatory, you know, should be able to report as appropriate. And for them, they find it important to, you know, document all the actions, and particularly adaptation, just to show, you know, what's happening in their countries, what is the situation, and if they're receiving money for adaptation, how much, you know, and what is it doing. So, and this is very important information, data, when we're talking about the global stocktake, because then we shall be able to see for adaptation for these countries, this is how much they got, and you know, all those stories. But for developed countries, adaptation is basically not their priority, but more mitigation. And that is why we are struggling with elevating adaptation at the same level as mitigation. That is why particularly the framework for adaptation being developed. And so more reporting burden, unfortunately, is falling on the developing countries, because particularly of the, I see more on adaptation communications, you know, the national communications, but with a more heavy focus around the adaptation, that they feel it's important to show what they're doing and where the gaps are and what's going on. Apart from that, there is the normal reporting that all parties are supposed to do, you know, in the BTRs, the biannual reports review. So there is that bit, but also, yeah, you're right, there's more, but you know, it's voluntary, but you cannot make something that is important to you to be voluntary. And that is why the developing countries feel it's important that they should be able to show this. And it's also important because in the context of climate finance, we've not been able to define what climate finance is, for example. And in this reporting, for example, some countries, and maybe Kenya, one of them, is saying any climate finance that is coming in as loan is our domestic contribution. So that is not climate finance, because we are going to pay that loan back. And some of these things are indicated in these reporting mechanisms that are, you know, that are channeled to the UN. And so it also helps to to show the different countries' position on a number of issues. As much as there is no definition of climate finance, countries are taking their own initiative to define climate finance, and that is what they will work with, you know. So even if all the climate finance is going to come in as loan, but for certain countries, that is they call it domestic contribution because they're going to pay back the loan, and it's not therefore climate finance. But grants, yes, can be classified. So these different reporting mechanisms help countries to also have a clear direction of some issues that are not able to get consensus at the UN level, but for them it's clear in their national documents, in their reporting documents, that this is how we define some of these things. Yeah. So it's just another strategy for, because I mean, UNFCCC space is political, so you have to, in interest, so it's also a strategy for countries to find ways to ensure that what they're saying is documented within the UN. And so if they do not agree with anything, then there's no consensus, then there's no decision on that thing. But we've always seen that most decisions, because of the power imbalance at the UN, then you find that the developing countries most of the time don't come out with a very strong deal that favors the conditions that they are in.
Thank you.
Okay, Marlene, if it's okay with you as well, then we can move on to the next activity, if my slides work with me, where we will put you in breakout rooms. Nadia, 2 or 3 rooms? I don't know if you've already prepared them.
So as Nadia is preparing the breakout, and I don't know how much time we have, I don't know if we are well beyond time, but
Yeah.
we would just like to hear from you the experiences if you or your organization has participated in any of these policy development processes, you know, the NACs or the NDCs particularly. Has you or your organization be part of this process? You know, it can be NDC 1, NDC 2, NDC 3. And, you know, based on your expertise on climate change, how could your organization contribute if they have not been part of this process, basically? And we're bringing this here because these 2 processes we think are very, very important, that countries need to engage. Organizations need to know where to plug in and when this policy is done. So how do you be part of the process to ensure that your work that you're doing at the local level, national level, are reflected in these policies, because that is how we influence some of these policies and plans that we develop. Nadia, over to you.
All right, I prepared the breakout rooms. I think we have about 8 minutes for discussion, and then I'll call you back to the main room, and we have a small debrief. So I'm going to open the breakout room.
So before you
now.
open, in your group, just get someone to report back in a minute. You know, someone can just give us an overview of what was discussed in your group. You know, like a summary, basically. Yeah.
And we'll
Thanks,
put
Marlene.
the questions in the chats as well, so you can see them there. So please all join your room now and discuss amongst each other. And if you haven't participated in these processes, try to, you can't hear me anymore. It's okay.
So they feel that I listen.
Welcome back,
So hi,
everybody.
everyone.
I think we have everybody back, right, Nadia?
Yes.
Okay.
Great. So hi again. So we have 13 minutes to close this call. So I would like to request that your report backs just take a minute from your group discussion, so we can have more time for quick you know, feedback, or if you had any questions that I could respond to. So maybe we quickly start with the first group, or anyone who would like to start us off. I was part of one of Jack Van group that I listened into more detail of their discussion. So I'm going to volunteer you to start us off. I'm sorry.
No, that's all right. I hope my internet holds. Otherwise, one of the group members will pop in. So we had a short discussion. We did a short round. And basically at individual level for our organization, none of us had experience in development or updating NAPs and NDC processes. We did share some experiences that we have in our individual projects that we are implementing with regard to climate smart agriculture or climate component in an existing project, but you're not, beyond that level of project or organizational level. And then our our discussion shifted a little bit towards the question whether that is actually realistic. So we'd like to hear from other groups if they do have experience. And when you were part of our group, we also posed that question to you. And then you said, well, that's a nice question to also take in the group at large. And then our time already ran out. But if I forgot something, Jess or Suhaib or Visa can add on what I said. Thank you.
Thank you. Next group.
I don't remember which group number we were, but Rua and I discussed, the same question, obviously. And she shared that CARE Iraq currently doesn't have a lot of collaboration with the government yet, or isn't involved in any of these NDC processes, but they do seem to have a smart strategy for first seeking or like establishing themselves as a strong leader on climate and adaptation, like within the country as an NGO that has knowledge on that, and then building a good relationship first with the Ministry of Environment and slowly then getting more involved. So probably in the upcoming years. And me from CARE Nederland, so I just joined CARE only last year, but I know that CARE Nederland has been, well, together with you actually, Marleen, pretty successful over the past years. Not necessarily on NDC processes, or I don't remember that, it's too far in the past, but on UNFCCC influencing on the past COP. There's been meetings with our Minister for Environment and also with European delegation members, because of course, seeing as we negotiate as the EU, it's always a bit more difficult to influence that whole big organization that is the EU. But it's pretty successful. I think CARE Nederland and the EU CARES are doing a pretty good job at direct advocacy. But then Rua and I did discuss just really quickly that I think because there is such a strong shift to the right all throughout the EU, that maybe an area that we could still grow in is indirect advocacy and kind of setting up more campaigns or showing the urgency and the appetite in society for more ambitious climate action, so that our policymakers are maybe more responsive when we come to them again. Yeah.
Thank you, Karima. Next group, please.
I can go ahead. So in our group, we discussed, so the group was CARE Canada, CARE Iraq, and CARE Niger. We discussed that CARE Iraq doesn't have specifically involvement in supporting the government in drafting these policies. Neither does Canada, although Canada is quite far down the line when it comes to having good policies. CARE Niger has probably done it around 2010, but since the member of the group was not sure, there probably has been some sort of involvement. We discussed the fact that it does make sense for CARE, no matter the country, to be involved in these kind of processes, because we have the ability to network with civil society organization and have a reputation that allows us to be a good entry point for government engagement, and that this is something we should probably do in the future if it hasn't been done already, whether in developing countries or developed countries.
Thank you, Siham, and I hope that partly answers the question from Jack Van's group. Is there any other group that has not reported back?
No, we had 3 groups, Marleen.
Ah, good, thank you. So to start with the first question, it's understandable that not all country offices or your organizations have not been part of this process. But these are important entry points to build relationships with governments, for example, to start with. And it opens more avenues to being part of other important process that the government does. So I just used the NAPs and the NDCs, but those are not the only important documents at the national level. There are other processes that goes on at the national level. That's when you are part of this process, they will always remember, oh, let's invite Marlene from CARE. Let's invite Karime, let's invite Sihem, let's invite, because they know you are an important player in the field and they value your contribution. So it's okay if we haven't started, but I think it's important for us to start building that relationship as important entry points to work with government. And for example, one of the country offices, most of them basically, and a good example would be from South Sudan. Just recently, they are having a partnership with government of South Sudan, and they have been given a letter of no objection. For example, if they want to access to be a partner as a sub-grantee in Green Climate Fund processes and all that. So how will you get a letter of no objection from government if you do not have a relationship with them? So that is just an example. So once you have good relations with governments, Ministry of Environment and other stakeholders, it's even easy for you to find a good relation and someone can call someone somewhere and you can get some of these letters of no objection that we need. Or you can be part of their process when they're developing the country positions. All countries do develop country positions when they head to COP or when they head to Bonn. These are also important avenues whereby we influence the position to ensure that what we are doing at the local level, at the country level with our partners are reflected in these important processes, because it gets a good ground to be discussed even at the global level, or it will be part of the something to decide on at the global level when a decision is being made. And you'll say, yes, we had a voice to ensuring that this policy has been passed. This policy, is good because we participated, we provided this information, we provided case studies, At the global level, we have a good number of examples where CARE has participated, for example, the Loss and Damage Fund, the Climate Finance Goal last year. So we part of these global voices, but also what are we doing at the regional and the national level? Because we want to say, yes, we are implementing projects on agriculture, on water, on nutrition. How is it what that we are doing is finding itself in these important discussions? Because all this is adaptation, all these programs implementing nutrition, agriculture, food security. How are these good processes and approaches finding its way in the NAPs, in the NDCs, and eventually at the top level where our countries where we are coming in with strong positions on key issues, why they need what they're asking for. So it's important for us to think of how to start engaging with our governments in these processes, but also they are good entry points for other further relations. So I will leave it at that. But if there are any other questions, I'm sure we can use the curator and I will be able to respond because of time. Diana.
Yes, sorry, I'm just bringing up the slide again. Marlene, do you quickly want to go over the assignments?
Yeah.
I hope all of you already had a look at it yourself, but in case you have any questions, we can clarify it for you now. The deadline to submit is on Sunday. Go ahead, Marlene.
Yeah, and maybe one thing I forgot to say is that JAP, this is very realistic. It is not very ambitious. It's just about intentionality to start creating the relations with the CSOs and the ministry. And you can just walk in I don't know, the context is very important. For example, we can see what is happening in CARE. So the context is important and is different. So you also have to know the timing of when to do all this, but it is very realistic, it's very doable, and it's not very ambitious. It's actually within what we can be able to do. So quickly to our assignments. So these are group assignments, basically something almost similar to what you're doing in your group work, in the group work that we're just coming from. So from your perspective, which climate or a resilience policy change could your organization advocate for in your national local context? And how could such policy change make a difference in the lives of the vulnerable communities that your organization aims to serve? So what is required to make a relevant power holders pursue those changes, and how can you or your team or your organization influence these power holders to achieve such changes? So I'm going to focus more on the first question, because then once you get it right, we'll be able to answer these 4 questions, and then you will present it as a group, the group assignments. And here in your groups, it just same approach you've used. It will be important for all of you to discuss the different issues that you think your country, your organization would advocate for in your countries. And then you can decide who's, maybe you can have one agreement on what to focus, or who do we support, whose idea do we think it's doable, we can work with. Remember, this is group work, but also it's also some sort of advocacy in the sense that you'll have to, someone can decide to say, let's do something from this organization or what I have proposed, or you can all agree, we unified that let's take up maybe a proposal from Suhab or from Karime or from Jack or from Sehim, you know. So it is up to you as a group to agree what is the problem that you're going to deal with as a group. You will go around the table and listen, and then choose what, from your perspective as a group, what climate resilience policy change could your organization advocate for in your national or a local context. And if this one will be very difficult, you can take it to the global level and pick one issue that you think you can address, all of you as a group. If you're not able to pick one issue from a national, like say if it's Iraq and support Iraq's idea, or you know, Canada or Niger or Netherlands, then pick one global issue that is, you know, resonating with all of you, and then you work with that. Is that clear? From your perspective, which climate resilience policy change could your organization advocate for in your national context or local context? So go around the table, listen to the different ideas, and then pick one, or decide to just get one global problem and focus on it. Okay? Yeah. And then after the group assignments, the issue that you have chosen, we are going to ask you to prepare a short video of yourself. And here we are just practicing some quick advocacy skills, basically, or policy influence skills. And imagine you are in an elevator with this key decision maker that you think would be able to help you address the problem that you have in the group assignment. And so you have 1 minute in the elevator to talk to this influential person. It could be the national level, maybe the Minister of Environment at the national level, or a member of parliament in the national level, or you had a chance to meet with Simon Steele, the Secretary General of the UN, and you think there's an important issue that he needs to ensure that COP30 should be able to achieve, you know? So what is that you will tell him in 1 minute, that influential person or anyone that you meet? So what you agreed in the first assignment is basically what you're going to tell us in I think it's 1 minute video of yourself, imagining you are discussing with authorities or this influential person who have the power to decide on these changes described in your group assignment. So it could be a local chief, you know, it could be anyone powerful that would help us achieve the problem that we have identified in the first group. And you have a minute. These people don't have time to listen because they don't even know us. Sometimes you use the opportunity you have to express yourself quickly, and even maybe, you know, reach out to them later and follow up the discussion. So this is the idea for this individual assignments. Prepare a short video of yourself. Imagine you're discussing with this important person about the issue that you have agreed on in the first group assignment. And yeah, what are you gonna tell him in 1 minute or 1.5 minutes? Short and sweet, just to ensure that your policy problem is very clear in your minds. It is not everywhere, it's not vague, it's very clear what you want to ask for. Basically, that is also another purpose for this assignment, to help us have more clarity because when you're having a policy problem, it's important to be very clear. Clarity, very short and clear. If you're not able to explain this in 1 minute, then it's not very clear what you want to do. So another reason for this assignment to help us just put our thoughts together quickly and have some clarity on the policy problem that we want to influence and how, and you have this person and what role can they play. So I leave it at that, Diana.
Thanks, Marlene. Vanessa is asking in the chat if an audio recording would also be okay, and that is fine as well, Vanessa. So either audio or video.
Yeah, but it'd be good to see your facial expression while you're doing it. I mean, advocacy is about everything. So, but please,
True.
audio is also fine. But if you're comfortable others to do a video, we will also appreciate that. We are learning, so doing learning reading is also very important. But yeah, audio as well is also acceptable. Thank you.
Exactly. Don't be shy. Marlene will be the only one to look at it and give some feedback. And it can just be with your phone, right? It doesn't need to be anything fancy. You can just use your phone to record it and then upload the recording. And if you have issues, you can also email it to us. So we hope that that is clear on the assignments. 1 minute just for the next steps. I already mentioned it as well. If you haven't done the quiz, please take the final quiz of Module 1 by Sunday, and also complete and submit the assignments and the module review, because on Monday we will open the second module on tools and tactics, but you can only access it if you've completed enough objects in module 1, if you've gained enough experience points. Okay, many thanks, Marlene, for facilitating this live session, and for all of you for joining us today. We will put the recording on Curator and the slides, so you can always go back to it. And of course, if you have any remaining questions, don't hesitate to connect with us through Curator with Marlene, or shoot us an email. And then we look forward to seeing you again in 2 weeks when we have Chikondi with us. Thanks, everybody, and thanks for the additional 5 minutes that we could steal from you. Have a nice day.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.